Wow, that sure was an exciting and productive break. Hey, I know we usually like to trade barbs beforehand, but why don't we skip that shit and just dive right in? You know, in the interest of time.
Oh, now you're concerned about wasting time. Fine, whatever. But you ain't gonna win back any goodwill with me or management.
As if I could to begin with. Anyway, I've decided today's video is gonna be a spotlight episode.
A spotlight on what?
Excellent question, Atom Smasher.
Eh?
Today we're shining a spotlight on the world of solo-developed games. Solo development is a formidable undertaking, but with it comes the benefit of a singular, focused vision, free from the influence of out-of-touch suits and far away from the grubby hands of those "I'm not a developer, I'm an ideas guy" guys. So let's continue where we left off last video and journey to the land down under with Repella Fella. Ooh.
What now?
Can I do the review in an Australian accent?
What? I mean, no, are you stupid?
How about just the intro, please?
Oh, for fuck's sake, fine. Just the intro. Got it?
Sir, yes sir. G'day, mate. Y'all remember Newgrounds? That wacky site with all those Flash games you played during computer class? You remember doing that, right Dave? No, don't deny it. I saw you playing Alien Hominid in the back, looking smug because you thought no one was watching. Well, I was. Okay, I wasn't. But I wanted to freak out all the Daves subscribed to this channel. But anyway, Newgrounds at its prime could best be described as a melting pot of aspiring talent and unbridled degeneracy. Kinda like DeviantArt. For every fun concept worthy of its own full-fledged game, there were 10 or so crudely made games about poop. But plenty of acclaimed indie devs started there, with some even building successful careers off poo-related games, like Edmund McMillan, who created Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac. I'm mentioning Newgrounds because our first game, Repella Fella by Misadventurous Games, has roots in it. The developer, who goes by the handle PhilJC, admits that it's something of a spiritual successor to his old Flash game series, Ray, which was a decently popular series of crude, violent games with South Park-inspired character designs and choice-based gameplay. They have their own off-kilter charm, and there are even a few references to them in Repella Fella, so you should probably give them a look before diving in.
Well, there's only one way we can try.
Ray, take this. Let's go.
Ray?
What's also worth checking out is a blog post from Phil on the Misadventurous Games site, detailing the long and arduous road to Repella Fella's release. 6 years it took, holy shit. Well, good on you for seeing it through to the end, my dude. And not to tip my hand too early, but I'd say it was worth the wait overall. Right, now let's get down to business and go over the plot. So Australia gets nuked. You know what? Let's rewind that a bit. In the land down under, we find ourselves in the role of a guy named The Fella, who works for an exterminator company called Repella Fella. With me so far? Anyway, the year is 1968, and the fella has just returned from Vietnam, now spending his days pounding long necks and being tormented by nightmares of his tour. He's called in one day to deal with a pig terrorizing a gas station, but unbeknownst to him, the Russian military is preparing to reenact that one mission from the original Modern Warfare. With alarms blaring and the apocalypse approaching, our bumbling protagonist stumbles into a shelter just as the nuke goes off. He soon discovers some unusual qualities about the shelter, with a mysterious computer informing him that he needs to remain there for 15 years and undergo experimental training. So the fellow makes the most of his time by training, reading, and relaxing in the gentleman's way. He later emerges from the shelter, but to his horror, not 15, but 105 years have passed. Time moves differently in the shelter, you see. The year is 2073, and Russia now occupies most of Australia. Hilarity ensues, and the fella eventually falls in with a mercenary group called the Bushrangers. Now the fella must evade the Russians and make his way through the strange but familiar post-apocalyptic landscape.
You might want to put that seatbelt on.
So the setting is definitely one of the more interesting aspects of Repella Fella. I know that's a bold thing to say about a game with the tags post-apocalyptic and Australian, which immediately bring to mind images of frothing at the mouth psychos in strange outfits racing souped-up vehicles through barren wastelands. It was cool when Mad Max did it, but I think we need to give that aesthetic a rest, alright? Not everyone's gonna be breaking out the football pads and fetish gear when the apocalypse starts, okay? Fortunately, Repella Fella puts its own spin on this well-worn setting, opting for a gleefully crass and irreverent tone and effectively blending wildly different genres together. In one level, you'll be soaring through cyberpunk skylines and hacking police bots. The next, you'll be scampering through a medieval castle filled with grouchy knights and confectionery religions.
People really believe this shit?
And rest assured, there are no chrome-lipped psychos or plucky resistance fighters here. Just disparate military factions, cynical mercs, politically correct robots, and ravenous mutated koalas.
Hey there. I'm not gonna harm you. It's alright.
The result is a refreshingly unique take on the post-apocalypse, energized by an amusingly unhinged cast of characters and commendable attention to detail in the world building, as seen with the Bomb Dodger's Bible, an encyclopedia given to the fella by his bushranger companion Ned. Every faction and creature you encounter is listed here, adding up to a whopping 120 pages of text. But if you're worried that you'll need to bury your face in it to understand the story, fear not, for Repella Fella does an excellent job of weaving its world building into the environments, with the hub area of Shambletown being a prime example. Through propaganda posters and terse conversations with the locals, we learn that Shambletown is nothing more than a thinly veiled recruitment center for a group known as the People's Militia, luring people in with promises of safety and a simple life free of technology. But not free of STDs, apparently.
Oh, Christ, I'm itchy.
Which I guess is a good enough segue into our next topic, tone. No, not the mech from Titanfall. The tone in Repella Fella embodies that old-school Newgrounds feel, as made evident by the hyper-exaggerated gore that rides a fine line between so over-the-top it's funny, and so over-the-top that it's weirdly disturbing.
If it isn't the little rat who started this entire mess, where are you going?
It also flies its Australian flag proudly, with its smattering of slang that's sent by American ass straight to Google, and liberal usage of everyone's favorite C word, count. Nah, I'm just kidding, the word is court. Nah, I'm just kidding, the word is cart. Nah, I'm just kidding, the word is whoops, we can't say that on YouTube, but it rhymes with punt in case you were wondering. But the slapstick violence and crude humor, while funny and part of the charm, aren't overdone to the point where it becomes impossible to get invested in the story. Thankfully, the game knows when to take its hands off the humor switchboard and just let a scene play out. Truthfully, some of my favorite scenes in the game were the more serious ones, like this conversation under the night sky between the fella and Alexandra.
You were on a front line?
Yes, where most of the fighting and border protection takes place. I needed to get as far away as possible. I knew that engineers would often travel long distances to maintain RAEF structures, and so I did all I could to join them. One afternoon, we were tasked with bringing down an old railway bridge to make way for a newer one. I decided to be on the other side of that bridge when the demolitions began.
It would have been very easy to undercut it with a joke, but instead we're given this poignant scene where the two bond over their complicated past. The fella opens up about his struggles with alcohol and suicidal thoughts after his service in Vietnam, while Alexandra talks about the death of her sister and the lonely life that followed.
That is awful.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It was awful. I barely got any sleep after that. I drank myself into a state every day. I put a gun to my head, Christ knows how many times. But now, ever since I was in that capsule, nothing. I don't feel anything when I think about it.
Certainly not the type of scene you'd expect from the same game where a foul-mouthed demon tosses a guy around a room till his arms and legs fall off.
Sounds like you've been through a lot. Well, I'm here if you ever need anything.
I will remember that. Thank you.
But I think that's why I like Repella Fella so much. It revels in its delightfully juvenile Newgrounds humor, but at the same time provides us with a detailed world to get immersed in and characters that have an appreciable depth to them. Suffice it to say, I was invested. So much so that I was disappointed when the game abruptly ended with a to be continued. But hey, it's better when a game leaves you wanting more rather than making you wish it had ended about 5 hours earlier, like Wolfenstein Youngblood or the average David Cage game. Speaking of this clown, Repella Fella certainly plays like one of his games, which may sound like an insult given his divisive reputation, but I'll remind you that the problem with his games isn't the gameplay, it's the hacky dialogue and terrible twist endings. Personally, I've always enjoyed the variety in the gameplay, how they alternate between atmospheric exploration scenes and exciting QTE set pieces. The multi-protagonist storytelling works too, my issues with the writing aside, as it's always interesting to see how the choices you make in one storyline affect the others. Repella Fella follows a similar formula, with the player bumbling through hub areas solving puzzles, making choices at pivotal moments, and controlling different characters. You'll play as a merc working for the Australian eradication agency named Matilda. That is, an eradication agency in Australia, not an agency that solely eradicates Australians. And Anya Solovyeva, a private in the Russian military. You hunt down and assassinate targets in Matilda's sections, and look for clues and interrogate suspects in pursuit of the fellow in Anya's. Their storylines are engaging, and a much-needed break from the relentless insanity of the fellas, in which you often have to resort to some peculiar methods to solve puzzles. Oh, and the game also has a skill system. Kinda, sorta, okay, not really. What it has is 2 different playstyles. You choose between Internalizer and, yes, it's actually called this, Brick Shithouse. Brick Shithouse is exactly what it sounds like. And Internalizer? Well, Internalizer almost feels like a parody of the Casey perk from Human Revolution. I chose this for my playthrough, expecting the fella to smooth talk his way out of trouble like everyone's favorite cyber detective. I probably should have read the fine print, because instead, the fella gets into long arguments with a literal angel and demon on his shoulders.
Aren't you just a figment of my imagination? Can a figment of your imagination do this? Huh! Ah!
Yeah, not so much a demonstration of the fella's diplomatic skills as it is him having a schizophrenic breakdown. And in keeping with the game's anarchic Newground spirit, the solutions your 2 biblical companions arrive at are often, well, take a wild guess.
And then what? And then we get his keys. Trust me. Okay, here goes.
I have to admit, these wacky moments were the source of many of my chuckles, and every time I selected the Internalizer option, I've wondered how these 2 knuckleheads were gonna turn the current situation into a splatterfest. Makes me glad I chose it for my playthrough, but I'm still eager to roll through it again with Brick Shithouse, if only to see the story threads and scenes I missed. I don't have too many critiques, actually. Well, okay, I wanted more variety in the gameplay. Maybe some action set pieces sprinkled throughout and more interactive elements during the cutscenes. I was going to dedicate a section to this, but then I got to the credits and the developer said,
Now, if I were able to make a sequel, the intention would be to build on all of that and make everything much more interactive. Something where you're in control more of the time.
And that's when I thought, well, now I'll just sound like a f***ing asshole if I complain about it. Guess I better get rid of all these notes I took, thanks a lot. So let's wrap this up in a neat little bow. To state the obvious, yes, I recommend Repella Fella. I came for the oddball humor and Adult Swim-esque art style, and stayed because I got invested in the carefully crafted world and compellingly crude characters. While I am a bit disappointed with elements of the gameplay, it's still perfectly enjoyable for what it is, and doesn't detract from everything else the game does well. It is, overall, a triumph of the sole development field, and it has heart, which is something we need more of in this increasingly cold and corporate industry. I want a sequel, so go buy it. Now, take that money you were gonna spend on the workplace vending machine and pick up Repella Fella instead. Support this mad lad. I need to see where the story goes next.
Alright, you got 1 left. Hop to it.
Let's talk about Tomato Way, everybody.
What? Don't have a snarky little segue for this?
I mean,
Oh, just spit it out.
Okay, look, I don't know how to segue into this one.
Then don't. Just play the montage and get on with the thing.
I didn't make a montage, okay?
Why not?
Because I think the game's intro speaks for itself.
Це ти, томати? За тебе платять живого чи мертвого?
Where the f do you start with this one? First off, I don't know how this ended up in my library. I don't remember buying it or getting it as part of a bundle. Maybe it just manifested in my library due to the sheer number of cursed games I own. Whatever the case, Tomato Way needs to be talked about. If only so I can make sure I'm not going insane. Because as I'm writing this, I'm still not sure if I actually played it or just hallucinated the whole thing. Hey viewer, go check my Steam account. Does this show up in my library? Does it even have a store page? Can you actually see the footage on screen or is it just static?
Talk about the game, damn it.
Fine, fine. So Tomato Way is Well, it's a lot of things. First and foremost, it's a barely functional FPS with terrible guns, craptastic melee, and light survival horror elements. It also runs as well as Cyberpunk did on the PS4, and I can totally understand why. Just look at those graphics. Must take a lot of processing power to render an empty room with 3 enemies, and okay, no, seriously, why does this game run at 20 FPS on a 3080? Did the game install a Bitcoin miner too? I also spent an hour trying to find the menu music online since I found it catchy. And also because I wanted to make sure I wasn't accidentally humming a song about the glory of Mao Zedong, because guess what? This game by a Ukrainian developer about tomato-murdering zombie vegetables has an upbeat Chinese pop song performed by Ulan Tuya in it for some reason. Yeah, that's the lady in the thumbnail. And it took me an hour to find because the developer, Vladislav Castillo Gonzalez, forgot the name of the song. How?
I'm sorry, is this a review or...
Oh, look at that. A segue. Wee. Does anyone else hear yodeling?
Is this a review or a mental breakdown?
I don't know. Oh god, I'm losing my mind and I haven't even touched on the story yet. Okay, calling it a story is generous. Vegetables do things, words are spoken, and stuff happens. But it's all complete nonsense.
Тобто. Ти мене виростив, тобто.
Я можу тебе завірити, що в мене ніколи не було сина. Томате?
A plot overview wouldn't do justice to the mind-melting insanity of experiencing it firsthand. So what I'm gonna do instead is summarize the first level. Ready? No, seriously, make sure you're sitting down for this. And if you can't for whatever reason, tough luck, buddy! So the game starts with the titular tomato sitting by a road, having a smoke and vibing. And then he receives a letter from a snail. And then he marches down the road and kills a robber. And then he enters a bar and asks the bartender where the sheriff is. And then the bartender explodes. And then the patrons turn into monsters and attack. And then he goes into the basement and sees tomatoes getting their juices harvested. And then he sees onions hanging from meat hooks. And then he frees some cherries from cages. And then they smash through walls. Wait, hang on. If they're strong enough to smash through concrete walls, why did we even— And then he fights a giant rat that spews fire and has eyeballs in its stomach. That was the first level. I genuinely can't remember the last time I was this baffled by a game. And yet, I couldn't put it down. Seriously, I started my playthrough at around 1 in the morning, expecting to play maybe a level or 2 before hitting the sack. But instead, I plowed through all 3 hours of it in one sitting. It's a mess. A big, unhinged, nightmarish mess of a game that looks and plays like complete dog shit. But it's these qualities that make it absorbing. Well, absorbing in the same way as something like The Faces of Evil. It feels like every inch of the game was designed to be as gross as humanly possible, from the uncanny faces plastered on each vegetable to the grimy interiors, which more closely resemble gas station bathrooms than they do their intended locations. Maybe that's just how the developer sees the world, as a giant latrine. I'll admit the repulsive aesthetic and nonsensical storytelling almost work in Tomato Way's favor. It's very close to being an enjoyable piece of absurd surrealism, with the weirdly disturbing body horror serving as an effective juxtaposition to the ridiculous premise. What stops me from recommending Tomato Way, however, is the dreadful gameplay. I always feel bad about criticizing solo-developed games like this, especially when it's clear it's the developer's first project. But here's the thing. You're charging money for this. And not to sound pretentious, but it's my duty to advise my viewers on how they should spend their hard-earned cash. I can't give a pass to something just because it was created by one person, especially when it's barely playable. For starters, the sensitivity is obscenely high, and there's no way to adjust it in-game. There's some light aim acceleration on top of that, made all the worse by the wildly fluctuating frame rate. It just feels awful to play, and I probably would have dropped it early on if it weren't for the fascinatingly deranged presentation, because I sure wasn't enjoying the atrocious weapons. You start with a giant fork and a shotgun that often misses at point-blank range, and at other times explodes enemies from halfway across the room. The Uzi you get later on isn't much better, with its only real advantage over the shotgun being the damage. But ammo for the Uzi is rare, so guess what? You're gonna be stuck using the shitty shotgun for most of the game. This comes to a head during the awful final level, which takes place in a claustrophobic hospital in which you fight bullet sponge pickles in lab coats. The Uzi will drop them in a few shots, but to repeat, you don't have much ammo for it. So you'll be using the shotgun here, and basically need to empty its ammo reserves to kill one pickle. The result? A level that should have taken 3 minutes to complete instead took 20 painful, agonizing, tortuous minutes. It soured the experience and was ultimately what sent Tomato Way straight into the not recommended bin for me. I don't want to end this on a negative note, so let me say this. I'd like to see this guy work on another game. Really, I would. He has an intriguingly bizarre and unique creative vision. It just deserves a better game supporting it. So Devolver Digital, why don't you give this guy a budget and a team, lock them all in the room for a few weeks, and see what happens? Come on, this shit's right up your alley. Seriously, what's the worst that could happen?
You done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Finally. Took you long enough. You're still in trouble with management, though.
My god, you're a broken record.
Ho ho ho, you'd better watch your tone, boy, or...
Or what? You'll report me to management? Again? Go ahead, I don't care. That's, what you were gonna say, right?
No, I was gonna say I'll beat your ass. And now I'm definitely gonna beat your ass.
Oh yeah, great. I'm sure management is totally okay with you assaulting their employees. Hey, do you think I can apologize?
No, but I'm gonna be a good sport and give you 15 seconds to start running.
Run? Where exactly am I supposed to run? This creaky old floor can support the two of us, right?
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't think so.